Well, when I was a very young boy, beavers murdered my entire family. And so this is really a revenge picture for me. It's very cathartic to have made this. Hundreds of Beavers, well, it's a 19th century slapstick winter epic. And it's about this fur trapper who has to go from zero to hero and become the land's greatest fur trapper. But in order to do that, he has to defeat hundreds of beavers. And mind you, these beavers aren't regular beavers. They're played by humans in mascot costumes. You know, you try to pitch that to an executive and they'll throw you out of your office, but that's the movie. That's all there is to it. The idea for this movie came from the director, Mike Cheslick, and I. We wanted to make another small movie, like our first feature, Lake Michigan Monster.
You're a dead man walking, Seafield.
Oh, why don't you go shoot a timpani player?
We wanted to set it in the winter time because just growing up in Wisconsin, it's like 5 months of winter. It's very snowy, very cold. So we just wanted to make a movie that had, sled chases, snowball fights, mascots. I don't exactly know where that came from, but yeah, but it started as this very small kernel of an idea. We wanted to make another small movie, but then as we started to write, it just sort of ballooned out of proportion. It just grew and grew and grew into the epic monstrosity you see today. But originally it started as this very small idea that we were just going to shoot a little snow stick comedy, as we call it, in the woods. But then once Mike started, bringing in his brilliance with After Effects, we realized any crazy idea we had, he could pull off with his knowledge of VFX. And so then once he said that, I mean, the ideas just started to, swarm and go all over the place. And there was never an idea that was too crazy to have. And so that's, like I said, that's how the movie just ballooned out of proportion and became this huge thing. Yeah. Well, my role in the film is the fallen hero, Jean Kayak. And I mean, it's basically just me in real life, just a drunk who is down on his luck and has to, is thrown into the wilderness and has to rise above and do whatever he can to, like I said, he has to go from zero to hero. And because if he doesn't become a fur trapper, this guy's gonna die out there in the middle of the wilderness. So he reluctantly has to become this thing that he is not. I mean, this guy's an Applejack salesman, He's just this drunken distiller of Applejack. And all of a sudden he has to become like this big, brawny, man's man overnight seemingly, or he's going to die out there. So it was kind of a fun character to play because you have to kind of go through a huge arc, And I think, we had some inspirations for that, but I think the biggest inspiration was probably the old Japanese samurai / actor, Toshiro Mifune, because, even though he was in movies with talking, he was really good at a moment's notice, showing the audience what sort of like emotion he was trying to convey. And that was very important to this movie because there's no dialogue. So you have to visually see, like, if I'm sad or happy or surprised or whatever, in a moment's notice. And that's also why we gave my character big, thick black eyebrows. Because as you can see, in real life, I just have like transparent eyebrows. And that doesn't really work when you're, making a movie where all you're like looking at is like my facial expressions, And that's why we had to, every day before we were going to shoot, the director, Mike Cheslick, would take a black Sharpie marker. And again, we didn't have a makeup department, it was just, Mike had like a black Sharpie marker and then it would just draw on big, thick eyebrows, sort of like Charlie Chaplin, the big, thick eyebrows, because it was very easy to convey then to the audience how I was feeling. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to play. Even the cold stuff. I mean, it was, like you drink a couple Irish coffees in the morning, you get out there, you're fine. So no big deal. The beard was for real, yes. Big old beard, very itchy. It's funny too, because when you're shooting outdoors in the cold, it's funny because you just naturally have the icicles start to form on the beard and everything. I think just from all like the beard oil and whatever. But yeah, that was my actual beard. And so, for instance, we'd shoot like the first winter and then we didn't shoot again for a few months. So then I could shave the beard off. But then all of a sudden, if we were going to start shooting in a month, I just would have to start growing it out again. Then we'd shoot and then, okay, we got a few months off. Okay, I'll shave it off. And then, okay, I got to grow it back out. But yeah, that was my beard. Yeah. There was no formal screenplay. The movie has no dialogue. So how do you do a screenplay with no dialogue? And the answer is, we don't know. So that's why the whole thing was board driven. Every shot you see in the movie was hand drawn on little index cards. And then we would take the little index cards and put them on a table and we would just sort of rearrange them. So the movie had a lot of callbacks and runners and everything just sort of interconnects with itself. It was just a big puzzle, and Mike and I took months figuring all of that out. But yeah, it was all storyboarded. We would take the storyboards themselves, the little index cards, and we put them in a couple of big binders, and then we would just bring them into the woods and then flip to the page. And then Mike would, point to our DP, Quinn Hester, and say, "Make my drawing." And then Quinn would have to, see the drawing and then line up the shot accordingly. And that's how we did the whole thing. We just shot the boards. Every day we'd have like 15 or 20 boards we'd have to shoot. And if we shot them in time, great. If we didn't, oh well, we'll pick them up another day, because that's the thing about shooting in the wintertime. Everything moves a lot slower, especially with a tiny crew like we had of like 3, 4, 5, 6 guys on set. And it's very cold and the snow is very deep and the sun starts going down at 4 p.m. So there's only so much you can shoot. But yeah, it was all board driven. Yeah. The movie plays like an old cartoon. And so we were making a live action movie, but we wanted these elements of make it feel very cartoony. And again, the fact that we wanted to make a very grand story, you just sort of, if you want to make a big grand story, on a very small budget, you have to make your effects look kind of cheap and kind of bad, honestly, uh, in order to tell a very big, grand, scale story. And so the cheap effects with the small budget just sort of plugged right into the fact that we wanted to make it sort of like cartoony and kind of 2D. So yeah, that was always something that we had planned at the beginning. And like I said, because Mike was always saying like, I can pretty much animate any crazy idea we have, it just got even more and more cartoony as we went. Yes, we always planned the movie to be without dialogue, and we thought that would also sort of separate ourselves from what everyone else was doing. Um, People always say, "Oh, I love those old silent movies from the 20s, Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton." It's a shame they can't make those anymore. And it's not true. There's no rule saying you can't make us, no dialogue movie anymore or a silent film. And so we just challenged ourselves as filmmakers uh, because, you know, you forget, it is called a movie, not a talkie. So we wanted to show versus tell, and that was a challenge because there was definitely times while we were making the movie where we said to ourselves, man, it'd be really easy if we could just say a piece of dialogue and explain this thing. But we're like, no, 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 we have to show. We have to show. We have to show. That's the whole point of making this. So we always thought from the get-go, let's try to challenge ourselves as filmmakers to make a movie without dialogue because, again, it was going to separate our movie from all the other things that were coming out. And part of that also is make a movie that's black and white and is a slapstick comedy, and it has mascots. You know, all these different elements um, were were just because we were trying to make something wholly original that you just don't really see nowadays, and hopefully that would kind of make us stand out, you know, because there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of movies that come out every year. How are you going to stand out from the pack? And we thought, well, this is might be the way to do it. The visual concept came about, again, it was, you know, again, because we had such a small budget, we knew we had to make another black and white movie. And our first feature, Lake Michigan Monster, has a lot of effect shots, that like cheap looking effect shots.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know it's like Michigan.
It's the name of the movie.
And this is my band of rowdy cutthroats, Dick, Nedge, and Sean Shaughnessy.
But there's like 300 in that one, and there's like 1,500 in Beavers. So there's a lot. There's like 5 times as many. Um, and so we just wanted to kind of take the end of Lake Michigan Monster, which is very effects heavy with these like cheap, silly looking effects. And we wanted to kind of stretch that out to feature length. So if you've ever seen Lake Michigan Monster, like the last 10 minutes or whatever is very VFX heavy. And we just said, what if we made a whole movie like this? And that's what became Beavers. So yeah, we always thought that people would well, we didn't know that quite to the extent that people were going to like it, but we knew that we already had some success with our first feature and people did like the cheap looking effects. And so we kind of thought like, maybe if we made it feature length, people would like it even more, you know? And I guess we were right. I don't know. I don't know. The music score was done by, well, first of all, DeWolf Library, which has been around since like the 30s. They have this amazing library full of all sorts of amazing orchestrations from so many decades past. And we used a lot of their tracks for Lake Michigan Monster, and so we just wanted to keep working with them. The nice thing, again, because you get so much music from so long ago, you have actual, real, amazing orchestrations in this library. Sometimes you'll be watching some old movies and you'll be in the other room, you know, I'll just be in the kitchen or something, you know, burning some toast or something. And then I'll hear in the corner of my ear, I'll be like, wait a second, I hear a song. Where's that song from? And then I'll go in the other room and the TV will be on and it'll be an old movie and it'll have some song playing. And it'll be, oh wait, it's that song from the movie we made, but it's in this movie too from 1938 or whatever. So they've been using this library for a long time, and they're all just so much beautiful music. So we used the DeWolf Library, and then we also got our buddy Chris Ryan, who's done a ton of amazing music work on various films and TV and commercials. And he did some like 9 or 10 accompaniments, specifically for like Mickey Mousing things on screen. So, you know, if I'm like sneaking up, you know, he would do like, you know, dun 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 dun, you know, that kind of thing. So we did a lot of like Mickey Mousing my movements or what's happening on screen, and him just orchestrating to what's going on. And then actually the opening theme song to the movie, John Kayak and his Acme Applejack, was written and performed by my dad, actually. And he has a you know, he's been playing music his whole life, and he also did the end credits song for Lake Michigan Monster as well. And it's been nice to work with him too, because these movies sort of give him an outlet to kind of show off how good he is as a musical. Well, I won't say genius because he's not. He's just an old bastard. But he's just, he's very good at what he does, and it's cool to, be working with my dad on some of this stuff. So between my dad and Chris Ryan and DeWolf Library, they really prop up the whole production. Speaking of people who are propping up the production, Bob Baradow spent, I think, 7 months doing what is basically his Sistine Chapel of sound design, sound mixing. Uh, he 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 just did all these original, amazing sounds for Beavers. And there was times where he would take some library sounds, but then he would tweak them in certain ways to fit what was exactly happening on screen. And he has this like awesome like home studio and everything. He like works so quick. And he'd be, he would do certain things, like for instance, there's a moment in the movie where like um I hit my I hit my crotch on this pole and I slide down the pole, and he, instead of getting like some silly sound that already exists, he would like take a balloon, and we would blow up a balloon. He'd really slowly let the air out, so you'd get this squeaking sound of like, that kind of thing. And he just did this all over the movie. The beavers themselves were camel sounds that he tweaked in such a way that, depending on how the beaver was feeling during the scene, like if a beaver was surprised, he would take the camel sound and he would tweak it so it was like, huh? Or whatever. So like I said, Bob Baradow props up the whole production. He's gonna win an Oscar someday. But yeah, it took him like 7 months. Crazy, crazy talented. The toughest thing as an actor was the gigantic raccoon hat, because the one I'm wearing now, this was the original prototype, and we thought it was pretty good. But the thing about it is, the raccoon in the movie, it's got a very big head, so my hat has to be gigantic. So that was so big and cumbersome and unwieldy, and I'm doing like action and stuff. I'm doing like flips and stuff, and I'm just trying to keep this stupid hat on my head. Also, the gigantic snowshoes, because again, everything's funnier. Again, it's like a live action cartoon, so everything has to be. You gotta take the norm, and then you just gotta like elevate it by 10. So we couldn't just have regular size snowshoes. No, they had to be enormous. And when you're walking, just with regular snowshoes, usually it's like, okay, I'm gonna walk, 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 walk. Okay, we got the take. Okay, now I'm just gonna turn around and go back and do another take, walk, 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 turn around. No, no, no. With giant snowshoes, you walk, walk, walk. Okay, do another take. Now you gotta like walk all the way back around over here, because you can't cross your feet because the snowshoes are so big, and the buckles never stayed buckled, and the laces never stayed tied. And if they did, they'd freeze. So now you got like these frozen snowshoes with the laces and the buckles just covered in ice, and you can't buckle them, and they're falling off, and they're getting buried in the snow, and it's just a big pain in the ass. You know, some of the other stuff was a little tricky, like sometimes I had to act when there wasn't other things to interact with. We were like shooting just against a green screen. That was a little tough sometimes, but honestly, just the costume stuff was the biggest pain in the ass.